The night I called him, I was sitting on the floor of my bathroom with the lights off. Not because I thought the dark would hide me. I just couldn't make myself stand up. My legs had stopped working somewhere between the front door and the hallway, and the bathroom was as far as I'd gotten before my whole body decided it was done. I had my phone in my hand, screen brightness turned all the way down. I don't know how long I sat there before I actually dialed. His name in my contacts was just his last name, Mr. Ashford. That's what I'd called him for almost 2 years. Mr. Ashford in emails, Mr. Ashford in the boardroom, Mr. Ashford when I answered his phone and told his clients he was unavailable. Even in my own head, even when I was annoyed with him, even when he sent me a message at 11:30 on a Friday night asking me to rebook a flight, Mr. Ashford. I pressed call before I could talk myself out of it. He picked up on the second ring. Nolan's office. That was what he always said. Didn't matter what time it was. Didn't matter that it was Sunday. He'd probably been awake, probably at his desk in that downtown condo of his with the floor-to-ceiling windows, going through something that could have waited until Monday but never did. I didn't say anything right away. "Hello?" His voice shifted. Something in it changed. Not concern exactly, just attention. The way he got when something wasn't adding up the way it should. Willa. That was my name. Willa Fenn. I'd been his executive assistant for 22 months, and I could count on one hand the number of times he'd called me by my first name. "I'm sorry to call," I said. My voice came out weird, quiet and sort of scraped clean of anything useful. A beat of silence. "Where are you?" "Home. Are you hurt?" "No." I looked down at my hands in the dark. That wasn't entirely true, but it was true enough for the question he was asking. I didn't know who else to call. I heard him move, the particular sound of him getting up from a chair. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. "Don't open the door for anyone. I should back up." His name was Nolan Ashford. He ran a private equity firm out of a glass tower on Bay Street, the kind of place where every surface was either marble or matte black, and the air always smelled faintly like espresso and money. He was 36. Broad shoulders, dark hair, the sort of face that looked like it had decided to be serious early in life and had never reconsidered. He didn't smile a lot, but when he did, it meant something. I'd gotten the job 2 days after I moved to Toronto. I was 27, freshly arrived from a small city in Nova Scotia, with a resume that looked fine on paper, and approximately 0 connections in a city, where connections were the whole point. The recruiter told me the position had a high turnover rate. I found out later that meant the last 3 assistants had quit within 8 months combined. 2 of them cited his hours. One just said, "It's a lot. I took the job anyway. I needed the benefits and I needed to not think about the previous 2 years of my life." His name was Devin Marsh. We'd met at university, dated for 4 years, and I'd spent the last 18 months of that relationship convincing myself that the way he made me feel was normal, that everyone's partner talked to them the way he talked to me, that "you'd be lost without me" was a term of endearment and not a threat, that the way he managed our shared account, always deposits in, very few withdrawals I'd actually authorized, was just him being organized. I left in February, drove to Toronto in a snowstorm with 2 suitcases, and my best friend Angie on the phone the whole way, talking me through every kilometer. For a while I thought I was safe. Working for Nolan Ashford was, to put it simply, a lot. The hours were long. The expectations were high. He didn't explain himself often, and he didn't thank people much. And if you made the same mistake twice, you got a look that made you feel like you'd personally disappointed the concept of efficiency. But he was also, underneath all of that, scrupulously fair. He paid above market. He approved my dental claim the same week I submitted it, no questions. When I had a family thing in October, my grandmother's funeral back in Antigonish, he told me to take the week, no discussion, and had flowers delivered to the church. Not from the company, from him. I noticed things like that. I tried not to, but I did. He called me Fenn, mostly. Sometimes just a look across the boardroom table that meant, "Handle this." I was good at reading him, better than I'd expected to be. It became a quiet sort of language between us, his clipped requests, my preemptive solutions, the rhythm of a working relationship that functioned because we'd both stopped needing to explain ourselves. I wasn't supposed to be thinking about him as anything other than my employer. I was not always successful at that. Devin found me in March, 14 months after I'd left. I don't know how. I never gave him my address. I'd been careful, not paranoid, just careful. The way you learn to be when someone has spent years making you feel like your instincts are wrong and then proven, in the end, that they weren't. He showed up outside my building on a Tuesday evening, just standing there when I came back from the grocery store, hands in his pockets like he was waiting for a bus. "Hey," he said, like it had been a week, like we'd just stepped out for a bit. I stood there with a bag of groceries and a very specific kind of cold feeling that had nothing to do with the March air. "You need to leave," I said. "I'm not doing anything wrong." He said it so evenly. That was always the thing that got me. How calm he was. How reasonable he sounded, even when nothing about the situation was reasonable at all. "I just wanted to talk." "We don't have anything to talk about, Willa." The way he said my name, like I was being dramatic, like I was the one making things difficult. "Come on." I went inside. I told the concierge. I changed my walk to the subway. I started taking different routes home. He didn't stop. The messages started first. Not threatening ones. He was too smart for that. Just persistent. Long and measured, reminding me of things we'd shared, asking questions that were designed to make me feel like I owed him an answer. A photo here, a memory there. Then came the evening he showed up at a restaurant where I was having dinner with Angie. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said. He looked genuinely surprised. He probably was. That was almost worse. Angie told him to leave. He did, but he lingered at the door long enough to make his point. I called her afterward when I was home, and cried in a way I hadn't let myself cry in a long time. She said to call the police. I said I would, I meant to. But he hadn't technically done anything, hadn't crossed any line that would hold up in a report, and I knew how it would sound. I'd been in enough conversations where Devin had made things sound a certain way. I told myself I'd handle it. I kept telling myself that until the Sunday night in April, when he got into my building. I still don't know how. The concierge said later he'd come in behind a delivery driver. Whatever the case, he knocked on my apartment door at 9:47 p.m., and I knew immediately, from the knock alone, who it was. I didn't open the door. He knocked for 6 minutes. I stood in the hallway and counted. Then he went quiet. I thought he'd left. He hadn't. He'd sat down in the hallway. I could hear him, very faintly, just waiting. And something about that particular patience, the specific certainty that he knew I was in there, and he could just stay until I came out. I backed into the bathroom and sat down on the floor and turned off the lights, and then I picked up my phone. I scrolled past Angie's name. She had 2 little kids and it was late, and I'd already called her too many times, and I was so tired of needing to be talked off a ledge by the people who loved me. I needed something different. I needed someone who would not say, "Oh my God, Willa," and then spend 20 minutes not knowing what to do. I pressed call. "Nolan's office," he said. He was there in 18 minutes. I know because I was still on the bathroom floor and I counted those too. He didn't call on his way over. He texted once. "Still there?" I replied. "Yes, that was it." When he knocked, he said his name. I opened the door with my hands still shaking slightly, and he looked at me, really looked, the way he sometimes did when he was assessing a situation that needed solving, and then he looked past me at the empty hallway behind him. "He left," I said. "About 10 minutes ago, I think." I heard the elevator. Nolan nodded once, came inside without being asked, closed the door behind him, locked it, and then stood in my front hallway, taking in the apartment like he was making note of the exits. "How long has this been going on?" he said. "Since March. It's April, I know." He looked at me, not with judgment. I want to be clear about that, because I'd been preparing myself for something that looked like judgment, from him of all people. He was a man who solved problems efficiently, and I had let a problem run for 6 weeks without solving it. But that's not what his face did. He just said, "Sit down, Fen." I sat. He asked questions. Not many. He was never someone who used words inefficiently, but he asked the right ones. How had Devin found me, as far as I knew? What had been documented? Whether I'd spoken to building management? Whether Devin had any connection to my workplace? That last question made something cold happen in my chest. "He doesn't know where I work," I said. "I don't think." Nolan's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. "Okay," he said. "I'll take care of it." "What does that mean?" "It means you don't need to worry about it." I looked at him for a moment. There were things people said and things people meant, and with most people you had to do a lot of work to figure out which was which. With Nolan, I'd learned they were the same thing. If he said he would handle something, it was already handled. Why? I said. He looked at me like the question didn't quite make sense to him. Because you called me, he said. Simple. Like that was the whole answer, and maybe it was. He didn't stay long that night. He called the concierge desk before he left, and had what sounded like a very brief and very unambiguous conversation about building security protocols. He told me to send him Devon's full name and last known address if I had it, no explanation as to why. He checked the lock on my door twice. On his way out, he paused and looked back at me, and something crossed his face that I didn't know what to do with. Get some sleep, he said. You're in at 9:30 tomorrow. I laughed. It came out kind of broken, but it was a real laugh. Good night, Mr. Ashford, I said. He paused at that, just briefly. Nolan, he said, and left. Devon stopped showing up. I don't know exactly what Nolan did. I asked him once, about a week later. We were in the office late, the kind of quiet that settled into the building after 7 when the other staff had gone. I put a coffee on his desk and said, Can I ask you something? He looked up from whatever he was reading. Willa, first name again, Devon. I haven't heard from him. At all. Not a message, nothing. It's been 8 days. Nolan considered this for a moment. His employer was made aware of some documentation, he said. And he was advised, through the appropriate channels, that any further contact with you would result in legal escalation. The documentation included security footage from your building, records of prior incidents, and a letter from my firm's legal team. I stared at him. You didn't have to do that. No, he agreed. That must have cost. Fen, I stopped. It's done, he said. And then, after a moment, he shouldn't have made you sit in the dark. That was it. That was all he said about it. I went back to my desk and sat down and looked at my screen for a while without seeing anything on it. The thing I keep coming back to when I try to explain this to people is how little changed on the surface. We went back to work. I kept his calendar, screened his calls, pre-drafted correspondence, sat in on meetings and anticipated what he'd need before he asked. He was still demanding, still exacting, still the kind of person who expected a lot, and said very little about it in either direction. But he started leaving a light on in the outer office when he knew I was working late, even when he wasn't there. He texted me when a severe weather advisory went out one evening to check whether I had a safe way home. He remembered, without being reminded, that I kept Thursday evenings free because I did a pottery class in Leslieville, the first thing I'd signed up for since I moved to Toronto, the first thing that was just mine, and he stopped scheduling calls that conflicted with it. Small things, nothing that you'd point to on its own. But I noticed. I'd always been good at noticing things about him, and he seemed to have gotten better at noticing things about me, and neither of us said anything about any of it. He still called me Fen, mostly. Except, he started saying my actual first name at certain moments. Not formal ones, never in a meeting, never when other people were around, only in the quiet, and only occasionally, and only when the thing he was about to say seemed to require something more precise than a last name. Willa, like he was making sure I was listening. Like some things only worked when they were said to me specifically. I don't know if he knew what he was doing. I think he probably did. He was not a man who did things accidentally. My therapist, I'd started seeing someone in May, which should have happened much sooner, but here we were, asked me once whether I was making sure not to jump from one situation directly into another. She didn't say his name. She didn't have to. She'd heard enough of my Tuesday sessions to have assembled a picture, without needing to be explicit about it. I'm not doing that, I said. She nodded in the specific way that meant she was noting what I said without endorsing it. I'm not, I said again. I know what that would look like. And I did. I was genuinely aware of all the reasons why what I was doing needed to happen in a certain order. I needed to learn how to be in my own apartment without listening for sounds in the hallway. I needed to start going for walks again that weren't planned around avoiding routes, Devon might know. I needed to be able to sit through a dinner with Angie without watching the door. I did all of that. It took the better part of 8 months. But I thought about him. I thought about him in the way that you think about someone when you've stopped trying not to, when the thinking becomes so regular that it's just part of the furniture of your mind. I thought about the way he said my name in a quiet office. I thought about the fact that he had sent his firm's lawyers, after a man who had made me sit on a bathroom floor in the dark. And he had done it without asking me to thank him, without bringing it up again, without turning it into something I owed him. That mattered to me more than I knew how to say. It was October. The city had gone gold and cold the way Toronto does, leaves everywhere, that particular smell of autumn and lake air that I had come to love in a way I hadn't expected. I was tidying up at the end of the day. Most of the office was empty. I could hear him on the phone in his office, the low register of his voice through the glass, something about a deal in Calgary that had been giving everyone headaches for weeks. I was pulling on my jacket when I heard him finish the call. A moment later, he appeared in the doorway. "You have that class tonight," he said. "I do." I paused. "The instructor says I've graduated from making slightly uneven mugs to making significantly uneven mugs." The corner of his mouth moved. On him, that counted as a full smile. "Progress," he said. "Tremendous progress." I picked up my bag. Something made me pause. I'd been thinking about saying this for a while, and I'd decided that if I ever found the right moment, I'd stop waiting for it to be perfect and just say it. I wanted to say thank you for what you did in April. I don't think I ever said it properly. He looked at me for a moment. "You don't owe me a thank you for that." "I know I don't. I want to give you one anyway." He was quiet. He looked down briefly, and when he looked back up, there was something open in his face that I didn't see often. "How are you?" he said. Not as a pleasantry. He meant it. "Better," I said. "Actually better. Not just fine." I considered him. "How are you?" He seemed mildly surprised by the question, which told me something. "I'm fine," he said. "You're always fine," I said. "That's not what I asked." He looked at me. There was a long pause. Outside, the wind moved through the street, and I could hear it faintly through the windows. "There are some things I've been waiting to say," he said slowly. And I wasn't sure of the timing. My heart did something unreasonable. "You have notoriously good timing," I said. "You've never misjudged a deal in the 2 years I've worked for you." "That's different." "How?" Another pause. He seemed to be choosing his words with some care, which he didn't often need to do. "This is more important," he said. I stopped pretending I needed to find anything in my bag. "I know what it looks like," he said. "The professional consideration. I want you to know that I'm aware of how it could be read. I've thought about it a great deal. And I would not be saying any of this if I did not believe that you had enough distance now, from what happened, to tell me, honestly, if this is not something you want, Nolan." He stopped. "I've been waiting for you to say something since June," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "June," he repeated. "The thing with the weather advisory, and the Thursday evenings." Something shifted in his expression. Something that looked almost like relief. "I kept the light on," he said. "I know, for you. I know that, too." He came across the room and stopped a couple of feet from me, close enough that I could see the exact moment his composure did something it didn't usually do. "For the record," he said, "I've been calling you Willa in my head since November." "Last November. That's a long time to keep something in your head." "I'm patient," he said. "When something matters." I looked up at him. I was not afraid. That was the thing I kept noticing, the thing I wanted to hold on to and remember. I was not braced for anything. I was just standing in an office at the end of an ordinary day, in a city I'd grown to love, talking to someone who had never once made me feel small. "Hi," I said, because I didn't know what else to start with. The real thing, the beginning of it. "Hi," he said. We took it slowly, his idea as much as mine. He said once, this was later, after things had settled into what they were going to be, that he hadn't wanted to rush anything that he planned to keep. I wrote that down when he wasn't looking. I have it still. Devin eventually moved back to Halifax. I heard this from someone we'd both known at university, not from any involvement on my part. He'd gotten a job with a firm there. He didn't contact me again. I filed a formal report in the spring, for the record. My therapist and my lawyer both said it was a good idea to have something documented, and they were right. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a thing I did for myself, to close that chapter the way it deserved to be closed, officially, on paper with my signature. Angie came to visit in August. We walked the waterfront and ate too much at a place in Kensington Market, and she spent approximately 40 minutes asking me questions about Nolan that I answered with varying degrees of evasiveness, until she held up her hand and said, "You're happy? Not a question." "Yeah," I said. "I am." She hugged me for a long time on the street. which made several strangers give us curious looks, and I didn't care at all. It's strange, looking back at the version of me who sat on a bathroom floor in the dark and couldn't think of who to call. She seems both very close and very far away. I understand her completely. The way the fear hollows you out, the way you stop being able to trust your own instincts after someone has spent years telling you they're wrong. I understand why she waited too long to say anything, why she made herself as small as possible, and hoped the problem would shrink with her. What I want to tell her, what I'd tell anyone who finds themselves recognizing something in this, is that the instinct to call someone wasn't weakness. It was the first right thing I'd done in years. And the person who picked up the phone said my name before I'd even said a word. The rest of it, the slowly becoming okay, the slowly learning to trust myself again, the slowly learning that asking for help did not make me someone who needed to be managed. All of that came after, but it started there, in the dark, with a phone call, with someone who answered on the second ring.